name is Michael McKay, and I've had the honor of being your host and interviewer of the acclaimed science writer Debora MacKenzie today. She's been covering emerging diseases, a vitally important subject for all of us, for more than 30 years, across a wide range of titles, including The New Scientist. And she's been reporting on COVID-19 from the start. In fact, I have her most recent book, which I've just finished reading here, COVID-19, the pandemic that never should have happened, and how to stop the next one. It's a brilliant read, and I recommend it to all of you. Because of her range of knowledge and many years of experience, we will discuss COVID-19 from many different aspects, not just airports and air travel. And by the way, Debora was one of the first journalists to suggest that COVID-19 could become a pandemic. Hello, Deb. I'm delighted to meet you and have this chance to talk to you.
Delighted to meet you.
Though the news of the progress of the COVID-19 pandemic is on our TV screens every day, it's still worth taking a quick look at the big picture. Where are we now, and how do we get there?
Well, where we are now is with officially 4.3 million confirmed cases and 1.3 million deaths, and both of those numbers are serious underestimates. And that's just crazy. And it's exactly, however, what people have been predicting for years. Scientists have been saying for, well, to begin with, in about 1992, they were coming out with serious warnings like, you know, we're due for some new diseases. This was after AIDS hit, of course.
As early as 1992?
Yep. There was a big report from the Institute of Medicine in the United States, widely read. And I remember reading it with one of my editors, and we just looked at each other and went, we've got to start covering this. AIDS took everyone by surprise. We thought we had beaten infectious disease. And then AIDS happened, and a few other things, Legionnaire's disease. And we suddenly realized that there was a huge source of new germs out there in wild animals, and they were jumping to us. Those are the two things that are happening. One, we're rubbing up against wild animals more, just because of the way we're living, because of our economies. And two, there's more of us, and we're crowded together and we're traveling. That's actually the take-home for the airline industry. Basically, this pandemic absolutely moved with airplanes. People on airplanes are to COVID-19 what the mosquito is to malaria. When they've done the numbers, they've shown that basically the number of cases you got in different cities when you got them there is exactly proportional to the number of passenger arrivals. It's you know, beyond doubt, it's amazing.
In your current book, you write some very powerful statements about airports and air travel. Explain to me your main point of view that though laid low as we speak, there's an important challenge and opportunity looking this business sector right in the face. Tell me about it.
If COVID-19 teaches us anything, it is that we are now effectively biologically one community. And it's about time we started living like it. And, you know, I don't see how we're going to live peacefully as a global community if people can no longer go and see the rest of the planet. If flying becomes the preserve of a few rich people and ordinary people can no longer travel around the world. I think that would be almost an existentially bad mistake to make if we did that. Therefore, you know, despite the fact that, yeah, COVID shows us that flying by airplane moves our germs around, shouldn't really come as a surprise. But we need to keep traveling in order to evolve into the global community we need to be. There's plenty of autocrats out there trying to incite us against each other. But if somebody's saying, I'm not going to go to war with them, you know, I've got family there, I've got a job there, I went there last year, it was really nice. You know, those people are more likely to understand each other and get along than not. I'm not saying it's the key to world peace, but I think if we stopped being able to go see the rest of the world on a regular basis as ordinary people, all sorts of stuff would come unstuck, not least the basis of our current globalized economy.
So that's the challenge, but where is the opportunity for the airline sector or the airport sector in that challenge you just laid down?
Well, the airport sector has already worked it out.
Yeah.
We can keep traveling, we just don't take our germs with us. And of course now the airports are already gearing up to test people for COVID-19 before they get on airplanes, or in some cases after they've arrived. And somehow, and I hope this happens, parlay this into much more sensible ways of controlling COVID-19 traveling by air than these willy-nilly quarantines that governments have been instituting. That's a very promising development because we're to the point now where if we took this platform that they're developing, you know, tests for COVID-19 before you get on an airplane, and expanded it, let's say we had a battery of tests that becomes as routine as the ordinary security procedures that airports had to bring in after 9/11? What if we brought that in, just a battery of quick tests for a range of pathogens, say unfamiliar, you can test for unfamiliar pathogens, unfamiliar coronaviruses, novel flu, and you've got to do that. Nowadays, when you get on a plane in Geneva Airport here, where we're speaking at the moment, randomly, sometimes somebody will come and swab your hands, and stick it in a machine, and make sure you haven't been handling explosives lately. And that's something nobody even thinks of. What if we could get testing to the point where we could check people for unfamiliar pathogens, not the common cold, but something worrying, before they get on an airplane? You could start with COVID-19, certainly, but let's take it from there. Airports could be the platform for a whole new way of maintaining our health on this planet as a global species. I wouldn't imagine that airlines would even have to pay for that. It would be such a public good that could become an important new area of expansion for airports.
So look, we're going to go back to that in more detail as we talk, but let's go back to addressing COVID-19 directly for a moment. What have we learned about it up to now? And though we are still in the middle of it, will we get over it eventually? Or is this a one-off? I mean, is it going to come back?
There's several questions there. First of all, yes, we'll get over this eventually. Hell, even the plague of the Middle Ages went away eventually. What happens biologically is basically a germ circulates until it can't, and that's because people are immune. And there's two ways of getting that way. You've been exposed, or there's a vaccine, and we're making huge progress on a vaccine. So basically, with COVID-19, this current emergency is going to be over. But what we need to learn, you were asking a minute ago, what do we need to learn about this? Well, first of all, we need to learn that this can happen. We all had carefully laid pandemic plans. Almost nobody used them. It was incredible. I mean, we just were not ready for this. It was like watching an oncoming train. We sat here and thought, oh no, it can't possibly affect us, until it did. People just weren't psychologically ready. Well, I think that's what's changed now. We realize, oh, wait a minute, those pandemic warnings that we've been hearing about for years from scientists, oh yeah, it can happen in rich countries. We can lose people. And let me just make the point here that we now think that the death rate on COVID-19 is probably less than 1%, probably more like 0.6.
And what would it be on flu, for example?
0.1.
0.1.
A bad flu year, 0.1. Yeah, oh no, it's definitely worse than the flu.
Well, what should be done to mitigate the spread of COVID-19?
Well, right now it's spreading in the community almost everywhere. But it's worth pointing out that in China, where it started and where they were slow to get moving on it, basically the only place it ever spread in the community was Wuhan and neighboring cities in the province of Hubei. Everywhere else in China, every other province kept it from spreading in the community. No one else in China had to lock down.
And we know why? The reason is because they locked down very quickly? Or
no, they didn't lock down at all. When they got cases, they quarantined them. They got their contacts, they quarantined those. They checked people. Anybody with a fever had to go get tested. And then if they had the virus, they were quarantined. Their contacts were quarantined. They contained it. And to the credit of the World Health Organization, they were saying that from the beginning. Now, I think, to begin with, we're so good at locking the door after the horse is bolted. To begin with, if we had controlled air travel a bit more, like, for example, I think something like 382 cities got people with COVID from Wuhan in China and around the world in the 2 weeks before they locked down Wuhan. If we'd shut down flights then, we probably could have taken a large chunk out of this pandemic. I don't know if we'd stopped it completely, but we certainly could have gotten a lot fewer cases.
And tell me what you think as a science journalist, science writer, someone who's read about this over many years, of masks, because in some countries they've been almost politicized, the wearing of masks. Tell me more about that in terms of what purpose they serve.
They stop germs getting out.
Yeah.
They don't really stop germs getting in. For one thing, they don't cover your eyes because, a lot of these germs, COVID in particular, comes in through the eye.
Yeah.
So they don't really stop you getting it. To begin with, they were in short supply. We knew it wasn't going to prevent people from getting it. And we figured, well, we don't need masks to stop people spreading it, because if you've got COVID, you're pretty sick, you're going to be at home, you're not going to be out walking around. So just generally, don't wear masks. They're not worth it. And then we realized that more than half of cases are probably caught from people who don't have symptoms yet. So what they realized suddenly was, oh my gosh, if everybody was wearing a mask and they're designed to stop the virus getting out, in fact, that's what we've got to do. It's not like we thought it was to begin with. Okay, guys, we've learned something new about the virus. Wear masks. This makes sense now. That's pretty easy to explain, isn't it? I don't know why more governments couldn't have done that. But people feel that it kind of infringes on their personal freedom. People have lost the habit of thinking we have to do things collectively, we have to do things together. We're all in this together, both left and right.
Deb, what in your opinion should be done to keep economies, jobs, livelihoods, particularly livelihoods like the people who keep this airport going? Not people like us who work from a laptop and need a Wi-Fi connection, just to keep them going, or at a minimum on life support. What do you think should be done?
Well, I caution you right now that I'm nobody's idea of an economist. I'm a journalist and I specialize in complex systems and health. But from what I can see, it should be possible, as you say, to keep those kinds of people on life support if we prioritize that. And I think probably we should. We want an intact economy coming out of this, and we don't want the kind of ill feeling that's going to result if we don't do that. The thing is that you know, it's important to note we will come out of this. We're still going to need those people. I don't know if we really have prioritized them enough. There's been a lot of money go into, for example, large corporate bailouts, and I think the airline industry itself is saying, look, you know, that's not necessarily what we need. You know, we need you to make rules that will get us flying again, and we can do that with testing. Let's talk about that instead of just bailing out the occasional airline, you know, that you want to keep going. And that costs a lot of money. I shouldn't try and pronounce on economic issues. They're complex enough, Lord knows. But I would have thought that just keeping ordinary people going should be everybody's priority in this.
What do you think the big picture on COVID-19 will look like a year from today? And what's lurking out there that you as a specialist in these things, compared with me as a layman, sort of sense or see that I could never see?
Well, everybody is putting a lot of store on there being a vaccine. Certainly in 12 months there will be some kind of vaccine, unless things go badly wrong and this turns out to be one of those viruses that just has complicated immunity and we can't solve all the problems immediately. That's probably not going to happen, but you know, there's always a chance. But I would think that in 12 months, yeah, we'll have a couple of vaccines. But, okay, people think, right, we'll be fine then, we'll be vaccinated, we'll be free, because everybody's used to having got, you know, measles vaccine. I almost died of red measles. My brother's 4 years younger than me, he got the vaccine. You know, we're from that era that saw all these viruses go away because of vaccination, and we think that's going to happen again. Okay, let's say we get a vaccine that works 70% of the time, and that's pretty good, especially with a first swipe at a virus. Basically, 70% of the people who get it will be protected. They won't catch it and pass it on. And then you vaccinate 70% of your population, which is also very good, especially in a year. It'll probably be less than that. Okay, 70% of 70% of the people will be protected. That's 49%, just less than half. That's not going to stop the pandemic. The vaccine will be really important, but it won't be a panacea and it won't happen overnight. And I think people who are expecting that to be the case might start going, hey, wait a minute, you know, what's happening? And why are we still wearing masks? Again, Tony Fauci in the United States was saying just recently, look, we're going to have to keep the masks on for a while because people who are at high risk of dying of this virus are still going to be at high risk of dying of this virus. One of the things that might not work out so well is that the people we really want to protect are the really elderly. They might not respond that well to the vaccine. You're starting to run out of B cells in your thymus gland by then, they think. And that's why basically, I mean, protecting older people from the flu, we all get a flu shot, right? It doesn't work that well in older people because we don't respond very well to that kind of immune stimulus anymore.
In your experience, what is the WHO really good for and where are its limitations? Let's just start a little bit of a brief analysis.
Well, if you're going to have global health events, it does kind of help to have a global health department, and they're the only game in town. Now, because people have been sort of thinking, well, you know, disease isn't our problem anymore, especially the people with the money, think, well, you know, that's the thing of the past. And, you know, like all international organizations, it can be a bit top-heavy, it can be bureaucratic, and do things clumsily sometimes. They all do that. Basically, they have not, the governments that run the WHO have not funded it anything like as much as it would need to keep a lid on this. Frankly, I think they've been doing the right thing from the start. I think they should have declared a pandemic earlier, but that's just my call. I'm a journalist, I'm supposed to criticize them. But apart from that, you know, they've been saying all the right things. And, you know, they get told, for example, oh, you didn't tell us it could go person to person. You should have known that. You know, when China wasn't telling anybody for the first 3 weeks of January that, yes, it does spread person to person. The WHO couldn't do that. Believe it or, yeah, I know, believe it or not, it can't go in and look. It doesn't have the power.
So it doesn't have the power to go into the states, the governments, the countries, to do that.
It can't go
except
look.
without their permission. Please, may we come in?
Yeah, and China said no. You know, the risk is global, but the responsibility for managing these risks is entirely down to individual governments.
So let's go to my second question. What do states, what do governments want from the WHO? What do scientists want? And what do the medical profession want from it? Because it seems there's not a conflict, but a slight dissonance there.
Well, I think people do want the same thing. They want the WHO to keep tabs on what is happening with disease globally, to tell countries what they should be doing, to come up with standards. That's always what it used to do, you know.
A monitoring organization, but not an active organization,
well, to look at things from a global standpoint, because nobody else can. It never used to be an emergency response organization. That completely changed after the Ebola epidemic in 2014. It was supposed to respond and coordinate the response between countries to global emergencies. But it was never kind of the global Ministry of Health. If we're going to have pandemics like this, and everybody knows we are going to, and we've had proof, if proof were needed, we kind of need one. And the WHO has been trying valiantly to be one. They've done pretty well considering. But they get less money than a big city hospital in the United States. That is actually a scholarly assessment of the situation.
The World Health Organization, smaller than a big city hospital.
It's about $2 billion a year. And sovereignty is still sitting back with the Treaty of Westphalia. I mean, you know, individual countries have sovereign rights. Now,
17th century
absolutely.
Treaty.
The world has moved past that. If your neighbor thinks you're making chemical weapons, they can call the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. Everybody has signed up to the Chemical Weapons Treaty. It says inspectors can come in if there's any doubt about chemical weapons in my country, and they can inspect anytime, anywhere. If you have a nuclear industry, inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency regularly come in and look at your accounts and make sure you're not diverting any for a bomb. They caught Iran doing that twice. It works. You cannot enforce international law because the highest authority on the planet is, in fact, the sovereign nation state. But you can verify international law. I also cover arms control as well as disease. They have similarities. And people don't realize this. They say, oh, well, you know, you can write a treaty. We have one called the International Health Regulations that required China to tell the WHO they had a new disease. They did. They were quiet about the fact that it spread person to person for 3 crucial weeks in January. It's just, I think, largely a figment of their kind of top-down political system that they didn't let it out sooner. It was just some local guys trying to keep things quiet, which it turned out was, you know, tragic for the rest of the world. That shouldn't be allowed to happen. So if we took this treaty and, you know, next time this happens, the country tells the WHO, we've got this new virus, WHO says, fine, our team will be there in the morning. You know, this happened in 2003 with SARS. When the WHO could send a technical team in there, suddenly we realized just how bad it was. Whereas the political people were keeping it hushed up, the scientific people were going, oh no, look, let me show you my SARS ward. I mean, you know, that's the way to do it. Verification, it works. Countries have given up total sovereignty in the financial area under the Bretton Woods Accords. You know, they can have an international organization come in and look at their accounts and impose adjustment measures if they don't think, you know, they're behaving in a way that's safe for international finances. So, you know, we've done this. We've moved beyond individual countries running everything. Man, if there was ever an area where we really need to do that, it's disease.
Okay. Thanks for answering all my questions so fully and lucidly. Let's all hope that while planning for the worst, that the worst doesn't really happen. The air travel sector comes through it in these testing times and proves of great value to society, as you've mentioned.
Totally.
And this civilizing mission, which I think is a very important phrase, is understood that brings ordinary men and women together, and that we can be thankful to the air travel industry for doing that.
Completely.
And that we end with the word together and community and the public good, which are all such important things. Debora MacKenzie, thank you very much.
My pleasure entirely.